Have you ever lived in your own home, but been treated like a maid? I don't mean being asked to help out with chores. I mean literally being told to clean up after everyone else, to serve food, to keep quiet while the real family enjoyed themselves. That's what life became for me the day my mom remarried and brought my stepfather into our lives. At first, I thought maybe it would be good. My mom deserved happiness. She had worked so hard raising me alone after my dad passed away when I was little. I told myself maybe this man would give her companionship, maybe even give me a sense of family again. But it didn't take long before the truth showed itself. From day one, he made it clear. I wasn't his child, I wasn't his priority, and in his eyes, I wasn't even equal. He never called me by my name. Instead, it was always, "Hey, can you clean this up?" Or "Go get me that." I remember one of the first dinners after he moved in. His two kids, my new stepbrother and stepsister, sat at the table laughing, plates piled high with food their dad had proudly served them. I was in the kitchen, scrubbing pans, when he shouted, "Hurry up and bring us drinks!" I froze, dish soap still on my hands, staring at the sink. Mom looked at me apologetically, but she didn't say anything. So I wiped my hands, grabbed the pitcher, and walked out to the table. My stepbrother smirked as I poured his glass. "Thanks, maid," he muttered under his breath. They laughed. My chest burned, but I said nothing. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and wondered, is this what my life is going to be now? It didn't stop at dinner. Every day turned into a list of chores. If I came home from school and sat down, he'd bark, "Don't just sit there. Pick up the laundry." If I tried to eat with them, he'd tell me, "Wait until we're done. Then you can clear the table." His kids left their messes everywhere, and it was always me cleaning them up. My mom, caught in the middle, kept saying, "Just don't cause trouble. It's easier this way." Easier for her, maybe, but for me it was like living in a house where I didn't belong. The worst part? He acted like he was doing me a favor. Once, when I dared to complain, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "You should be grateful. We put a roof over your head. You're not real family here. You earn your keep." Those words cut deeper than anything else. Not real family. I went to school carrying that weight, sitting through classes with a fake smile while my friends talked about their dads helping them with homework or taking them to soccer practice. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? Who would believe me? To the outside world, we were just another blended family. Inside, I was the invisible one, the servant no one admitted existed. I started keeping track of the little humiliations, like a mental notebook. My stepbrother got a new phone for Christmas. I got a used sweater. My stepsister had a sweet 16 party with balloons and a DJ. On my birthday, they told me to keep it low-key and handed me a $5 gift card. Even simple things hurt. They sat at the living room watching TV together while I vacuumed around their feet. They ate dessert while I washed dishes in the sink. I can still remember the way my stepfather's voice dripped with authority every time he snapped his fingers, like I was less than him, less than his children, less than human. And through it all, I stayed silent. I bottled it up, telling myself if I just worked hard enough, if I just kept my head down, maybe one day they'd accept me. But deep down, I knew better. They didn't want a daughter, a sister, or even a friend. They wanted someone to serve them. And for years I let them. Until one night. One night when my stepfather invited someone very important into our home. Someone he admired, respected, wanted to impress more than anyone else. He thought I'd just stay in the shadows, pouring drinks, cleaning plates, smiling quietly. But what he didn't know was that the moment his guest looked at me, the roles would reverse forever. You know how some families have that one golden child? The one who can do no wrong, who gets praised for the smallest things while everyone else is ignored? Well, in my house, it wasn't even subtle. My stepbrother and stepsister could leave dirty plates on the couch, spill soda on the carpet, slam doors, and somehow it was all fine. But if I forgot to fold one towel or left a book on the coffee table, my stepfather would act like I'd committed a crime. "What's wrong with you? Can't you even do one simple thing?" He'd bark, loud enough for the neighbors to hear. And the worst part? Mom would just stand there, wringing her hands, whispering, "Just do it, please. Don't make it worse." I hated her silence more than his yelling. At dinner, it was always the same. His kids sat at the table, plates filled first, while I stood by waiting until everyone else was done. Then when I finally sat to eat, it was cold scraps left on the serving dishes. Sometimes my stepfather would smirk and say, "Eat quick so you can clear our plates." I was the daughter in name only. In practice, I was staff. Birthdays showed me just how little I mattered. My stepsister's 16th birthday was an event. A rented hall, a DJ blasting music, a cake taller than me, guests piling in with gifts. I was the one refilling chip bowls and sweeping the floor at midnight, while she opened envelopes full of cash. My birthday? A single candle stuck in a day-old grocery store cupcake and a muttered "Happy Birthday" before I was told to take out the trash. Do you know what it feels like when even your existence feels like an inconvenience? When you're not celebrated, not cherished, just tolerated until they find another use for you? It grinds you down piece by piece. School was my only escape. I threw myself into studies, staying late in the library, telling teachers I was working on projects so I wouldn't have to go home right away. I got good grades, the kind that should make parents proud. But when I came home with an A, my stepfather barely glanced at it. "Don't get cocky. That won't matter in the real world," he muttered, before turning back to praise his son for scoring a single basket in a middle school basketball game. It was always like that. Their smallest wins were victories, my biggest wins were nothing. The contrast was humiliating. Even chores were divided unfairly. His kids got allowances for making their beds once in a while. I scrubbed toilets, vacuumed the entire house, did laundry for everyone, and got nothing but criticism. Once, my stepbrother laughed while tossing his dirty socks at me, saying, "Hey, maid, don't forget these." My stepfather didn't correct him. He actually chuckled. That laugh, it told me everything I needed to know about how he saw me. And it wasn't just inside the house. In public, he made sure to reinforce my place. At the grocery store, he'd order me to push the cart and carry all the bags while his kids skipped ahead. At family gatherings, he'd introduce them proudly. "This is my son, my daughter." Then he'd gesture vaguely toward me and say, "And this one helps out." Helps out. Like I was some distant cousin or worse, a hired hand. I remember one Thanksgiving vividly. Relatives came over, and while his kids lounged in the living room showing off their new gadgets, I was in the kitchen from morning until night, basting the turkey, mashing potatoes, washing dishes as fast as they stacked up. When dessert was served, my stepfather raised his glass and toasted, "To my wonderful kids." Everyone clapped. My name wasn't mentioned. That night my hands were raw from scrubbing, but the deeper pain was invisible. I felt erased. And here's the thing. Every insult, every slight, I swallowed. I told myself, just endure it, keep quiet, don't stir things up. But silence has a way of building pressure inside you, like a kettle left on the stove. And I didn't know it yet, but the kettle was about to boil over. Because my stepfather's arrogance wasn't just cruel, it was short-sighted. He loved to brag, loved to show off to important people. And when he decided to invite someone very powerful to our house, a man he admired, almost worshipped, he thought I'd fade into the background, serving drinks like always. What he didn't realize was that this man knew me, not as a servant, not as a nobody, but as someone who mattered in ways my stepfather could never imagine. And the moment our worlds collided, the hierarchy of our house would crumble in front of everyone. The night that changed everything started with the sound of my stepfather's voice booming through the house. "Make sure the floors shine. We've got a very important guest tonight." He strutted around like a general preparing for battle, barking orders while straightening his tie. His kids giggled on the couch, scrolling through their phones, not lifting a finger. Guess who was on her knees scrubbing the tiles until my back ached? Yeah, me. He didn't even try to hide it. "You better not embarrass me tonight," he sneered, pointing at me like I was the problem. "Just serve the food, keep your mouth shut, and stay out of the way." That phrase, "stay out of the way," stabbed deeper than he realized. Because this wasn't just a dinner, this was his big chance. The guest was the CEO of a company he idolized, someone he never stopped talking about. He'd drop the man's name at every opportunity, like saying it made him important too. And tonight, that CEO was coming here, to our house, to sit at our table. For my stepfather, this was the Super Bowl. For me, it was just another reminder that no matter how much I worked, I'd never be seen as more than the help. I remember standing in the kitchen, hands trembling as I set out the expensive china that only ever came out for guests. The smell of roast beef filled the air, mixing with the tang of lemon polish still stinging my nose from hours of cleaning. I wasn't allowed to sit at the table, of course. I was the one carrying plates, pouring drinks, darting back and forth while everyone else laughed and toasted. I could hear their voices from the other room, my stepfather's loudest of all, bragging about his kids, their achievements, his own so-called connections. And then, silence, followed by the sound of the front door opening. He rushed to greet the CEO, nearly tripping over himself in his eagerness. "Welcome! It's such an honor," he said, his voice dripping with fake charm. I peeked from the kitchen doorway and saw the man step inside. Tall, confident, sharp suit, the kind of presence that makes everyone sit up straighter. My stepfather looked like a fan meeting his idol. "This is my home," he said proudly, sweeping his arms wide. "My home. The same home where I scrubbed floors while his kids lounged. The same home where I wasn't allowed to be a daughter." He ushered the CEO to the table, offering the best seat, pouring wine with shaking hands. And then, as always, he turned to me. "Get the appetizers, now." His tone was sharp, commanding, like I was a waitress he didn't want the guests to see too much of. I carried the tray out, balancing carefully, my face burning under the weight of all those eyes. He didn't introduce me. He didn't even acknowledge me. Just waved his hand and said, "She helps out around here." Helps out. That phrase again. Like my entire existence boiled down to carrying plates. The CEO glanced at me briefly, polite smile, nothing more. I dropped my gaze and hurried back to the kitchen, heart pounding. Course after course, I played the same role. Refill glasses, clear dishes, wipe spills. Every time I came near, my stepfather's eyes warned me, "Don't speak. Just serve." He bragged endlessly to the CEO about his son's sports, his daughter's singing, his own supposed leadership skills. Lies stacked on lies, and I bit my tongue until it bled. I could feel the humiliation crawling under my skin, the kind that makes your hands shake and your chest tight. But then something happened. Something small, but it made my breath hitch. As I set down the main course, the CEO's eyes lingered on me a second longer. Not in a creepy way, more like recognition. He tilted his head like trying to place a face. I froze for a moment, then quickly retreated, hoping no one noticed. But he noticed. I could feel it. The rest of the night, I caught him glancing my way like a thought nagged at the back of his mind. Meanwhile, my stepfather laughed too loud, boasted too much, oblivious. He thought he owned the room. He thought this was his moment to shine. What he didn't know was that the spotlight was about to shift, and when it did, the man he admired most wouldn't be looking at him with respect. He'd be looking at me. I'll never forget the moment it happened. The clinking of silverware, the low hum of conversation, the smell of roasted garlic filling the air, and then the CEO suddenly turned his full attention toward me. I had just bent down to collect plates, keeping my eyes down the way I'd been trained to, when he said my name. My actual name, clear and certain. The room froze. My stepfather blinked like he hadn't heard correctly. "Wait, you know her?" he asked, his voice cracking. The CEO pushed back his chair and stood, towering over the table. He smiled directly at me, extended his hand, and with a voice that carried authority said, "Hello, boss." The sound of those two words hit the room like an earthquake. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. My stepbrother nearly dropped his glass. My stepsister's jaw fell open. And my stepfather, his face went pale, like someone had pulled the ground out from under him. He stammered, I don't understand." "What do you mean, boss?" The CEO chuckled, looking around the table, clearly enjoying the confusion. Then he turned back to me. "We've been working together on a project these past few months. She's the one leading the initiative, sharpest mind in the room every time." My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear. Part of me wanted to hide, but another part, the part that had been silenced for years, finally felt seen. I straightened my back and met his gaze, shaking his hand firmly. "Good to see you," I managed, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. My stepfather sputtered, You never said anything about this." His eyes darted between us like he was trying to piece together a puzzle that didn't make sense. Of course it didn't make sense to him. He never asked what I did outside the house. He never cared. In his world, I was nothing more than a servant, someone to scrub floors and carry plates. The idea that I could hold power, respect, that I could be recognized by someone he idolized, it shattered his entire image of control. The CEO pulled out the chair beside him. "Why don't you sit with us?" he offered warmly. The entire table shifted uncomfortably as I slid into the seat right where I'd been told I didn't belong. My stepfather's hands clenched into fists on the tablecloth. His son glared at me. His daughter muttered something under her breath. But none of it mattered. For the first time, I wasn't serving. I was seen. Conversation resumed, but it was different now. The CEO asked me questions about strategy, about decisions I'd made. He referenced meetings, praised my leadership. Every word was a dagger to my stepfather's ego. He tried to interject, to steer the spotlight back onto himself, but the CEO barely glanced at him. "She's the one driving results," he said firmly. "It's impressive." My stepfather forced a laugh, the kind that sounds more like choking. "Well, we always encourage her to help out," he muttered. But the words fell flat. Everyone knew the truth now. His idol didn't admire him. He admired me. My mother sat silently, eyes wide, torn between shock and something like pride. I caught her watching me differently that night, as if she was seeing me for the first time too. My stepfather's kids squirmed in their seats, suddenly quiet, their smugness gone. The power dynamic had shifted, and they knew it. And me? I didn't have to gloat. I didn't have to say a word. The CEO had spoken for me. All I had to do was sit there, shoulders back, finally in my rightful place. But the night wasn't over, because humiliation that sharp doesn't just disappear. My stepfather might have been silenced in that moment, but I could see the storm brewing in his eyes. And I knew, when the guests left, when the door closed, he wouldn't let it go so easily. The question wasn't if he'd lash out. It was how. The moment the door closed behind the CEO, the entire house shifted. The laughter, the polite clinking of glasses, the warm glow of praise, all of it vanished like a candle snuffed out. My stepfather turned toward me, his face twisted with humiliation and fury. "You made me look like a fool," he hissed, his voice low but shaking. His son and daughter sat frozen, eyes darting between us, unsure whether to speak. My mom looked like she wanted to melt into the wall. I held my ground. For years I had taken his commands, his insults, his dismissals. But tonight, the truth had been laid bare, and I wasn't about to shrink back into silence. "No," I said quietly, my voice steady. "You did that to yourself." His face turned red, veins bulging in his neck. "Don't you dare talk to me like that in my house." I almost laughed because it wasn't his house. It was my mother's before he married her, and more importantly, it had never been a home for me. It had been a cage. "Funny," I said, "because the man you idolize just made it very clear whose respect actually matters. And it isn't yours." He sputtered, words tripping over each other, but nothing came out. For the first time, he had no command, no insult, no weapon he could use to put me back in my place. His kids tried to recover, muttering excuses, saying the CEO must have been exaggerating. But the truth was written all over their faces. The hierarchy had shattered. I wasn't the servant anymore. I was the one with power. My mom finally spoke, her voice trembling. I didn't know," she whispered, looking at me with something like regret. I met her eyes and said softly, "Maybe you didn't want to know." That silence hung heavy in the room. My stepfather stormed off to his study, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. His kids disappeared upstairs, pretending to be busy. For once, nobody told me to clean up. Nobody expected me to clear the table. I sat there, staring at the half-empty glasses, the crumbs on the plates, the wreckage of a dinner that had changed everything. And I realized I didn't have to serve anymore. That night, lying in bed, I thought about the years I'd wasted trying to be accepted by people who only saw me as less, about the birthdays forgotten, the chores piled high, the words that cut deeper than knives. And I thought about the CEO shaking my hand, calling me boss, recognizing me for who I really was. It wasn't about status or showing off. It was about finally being seen. The next morning, my stepfather avoided me, skulking around the house like a shadow. The kids didn't make eye contact. My mom moved quietly, cooking breakfast without a word. The balance of power had shifted, and they didn't know how to act anymore. And I packed my bag. I didn't announce it. I didn't make a speech. I just walked out, head held high, knowing I didn't owe them anything. Because here's the thing, when someone treats you like a servant long enough, they expect you to stay small. They never imagine the day you'll walk away, or the day the world will recognize you for more than they ever allowed you to be. My stepfather thought he was the master of this house. But the truth? He was just a man propped up by lies and arrogance. And the night his idol shook my hand, those lies collapsed. I'll always remember the look on his face, the shock, the disbelief, the fear that maybe he wasn't the powerful one after all. And that, more than any revenge or confrontation, was enough. Because sometimes the sweetest justice isn't yelling back. It's standing tall while the truth speaks louder than you ever could. And here's the afterhook. To this day, whenever I think of him, I don't hear his insults. I hear the CEO's voice, clear and unwavering, saying the two words my stepfather never could, "Hello, boss."